Hello everybody. Today a very important lesson. I can identify if lines are parallel or perpendicular using parallel lines have the same slope and perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. So our first little activity we're going to do here is we're going to use our graphing calculator and graph those two lines. So let's get my graphing calculator pulled up here. Let's get this stuff out. And let's do y equals 2x minus 4. And let's do y equals 2x plus 1. And I always like to hit zoom 6 to get my nice perfect window. And my question to you is, what do you notice about these lines? Well, the answer is they're parallel. Hopefully you can see by looking at them that they're parallel. They're not going to touch. So my question to you is, what do you notice about the equations? Well, if you notice, their slopes are the same. So do you think that the slopes being the same is going to always cause them to be parallel? Well, let's try another line with a slope of 2. 2x minus, I don't know, 7. Is that parallel? Yes. Parallel lines have the same slope. That is a very, very important concept that you need to understand. Let's type it out. Let's use a fun color to type it out. It's not that fun, but whatever. It's fun enough. I think I lost it. Oh, it's not fun anymore. Parallel lines have the same slope. So it doesn't matter what the slope is. If the slopes are the same, then the lines will be parallel. So let's say I have some really weird slope. Let's say I have a slope of like negative 2.7. And I do negative 2.7x plus whatever, 3.1. And let's say I have negative 2.7x minus, I don't know, 5.03. Since they have the same slope, no matter how weird that slope is or how weird the y-intercept is, the lines are going to always be parallel. Parallel lines have the same slope. All right, next thing to look at. Graph these in the calculator. So let's go to my calculator again. Let's go back to y equals. I've got 2/3 x plus 1, alpha y equals, enter, 2/3 x plus 1, and then I've got negative alpha y equals, enter, 3 halves x minus 2. And let's look at the graph. Now, because these slopes are not the same, they should not be equal to each other. And to be honest, I don't love the way this comes out in the calculator because the calculator isn't exactly square. But what we end up with, and let me just see if I can write on this thing here. What we end up with here is right angles. And it's not perfect because the screen isn't perfectly square. And we know that right angles come from perpendicular lines. So the other big understanding that you need to have, in addition to parallel lines have the same slope, is that perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. Two huge concepts throughout the rest of this course that you're seeing today for the first time. Parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. Let's talk about what negative reciprocal means. Let's look at this here. One slope was 2/3. The other slope was negative 3/2. What's the relationship? Well, if I flip 2/3 and I negate it, I end up with negative 3/2. If I flip negative 3/2 and I negate it, I end up with 2/3. So negative reciprocal means to flip it and negate it. So let's talk a little bit more about negative reciprocal. Let's say I start with 3/4. I want the negative reciprocal of that. Flip it. If I flip 3/4, I get 4/3 and negate it. Negative 4/3 and 3/4 are negative reciprocals of each other. Negative 2/5. If I want the negative reciprocal of that, flip it. 2/5 becomes 5/2. Negate it, it becomes positive. Don't think of the top and bottom as being negative. Think of the whole fraction as being positive or negative. One whole fraction needs to be positive. The other whole fraction needs to be negative. 5/7. What's the negative reciprocal of 5/7? Well, flip it. 7/5 and negate it. How about negative 5/6? I want you to take about 8 seconds right now and tell me what the negative reciprocal of negative 5/6 is. The negative reciprocal, flip it. 5/6 becomes 6/5 and negate it. If this whole thing is negative, then this whole thing is positive. All right, let's do some twists. 1/3. What's the negative reciprocal of 1/3? Well, flip it. 1/3 becomes 3/1 and negate it. And negative 3/1 is just negative 3. Negative 2, a little twist here. I want you to first try it on your own. Take about 10 seconds, see if you can figure it out on your own. If not, I'll give you a hint. So negative 2 is negative 2/1. And if I flip 2/1, I get 1/2. So negative reciprocal means to flip the fraction and change the sign. If it's positive, it becomes negative. If it's negative, it becomes positive. And don't think of the top and bottom as being positive, negative. Think of the entire fraction as being positive and negative. So to help you remember all of this, we have a song. Geometry, parallel and perpendicular slopes. Enjoy.
Parallel and the same slope, perpendicular tone, perpendicular lines at negative reciprocal slopes, negative reciprocal slopes, flip it and negate it, negative reciprocal slopes. Parallel and the same slope, perpendicular tone, perpendicular lines at negative reciprocal slopes, negative reciprocal slopes, flip it and negate it, negative reciprocal slopes.
Yeah, parallel has the same slope. So parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular don't. Perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. And to find the negative reciprocal, I flip it and negate it. So number 1, it wants to know if the lines are parallel, perpendicular, the same, or neither. So I need to determine the slopes. To do that, we do what we did in the last lesson, and we need to get it into y equals mx plus b form, into what we call slope-intercept form. So I got to do some algebra. To get y by itself, I would start by subtracting 1. I would then divide by 3, and I get y equals 2x plus 1. So the slope for this one is 2. I now get y by itself for this one. subtract 1, divide by 2. If it doesn't divide nicely, leave it as a fraction. 1 over 2 is 1 over 2x minus 10 over 2 is 5. So the slope for this one is 1/2. Parallel has the same slope. Are these the same slope? No. Perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. That means flip it and negate it. If I flip 2, I get 1 over 2. But did I negate it? No. It's not parallel, it's not perpendicular, it's neither. It would be the same line if I got the exact same equation for both. So, find the slopes. If you want to know if they're parallel or perpendicular, it's all about the slopes. So get y by itself to find the slope. We did that in the previous lesson. So go back to that lesson, slope-intercept form lesson. If you're not comfortable with that, once you have the slopes, if they're the same, it's parallel. If they're negative reciprocals of each other, it's perpendicular. And if it's neither, it's neither. Number 2, what is the slope of a line perpendicular to the line whose equation is? Perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. So, 5x plus 3y equals 8. I'll need to get y by itself in order to determine the slope. Why don't you do it? Take about 20 seconds and get y by itself. I'll leave it running. You don't have to pause. I'll give you about 20 seconds. Get y by itself to find the slope. Subtract 5x from both sides. I can't combine them. I write the x term first. Divide both sides by 3. If they don't divide nicely, don't divide them. So I get negative 5/3 x plus 8/3. So the slope of this line is negative 5/3. It's not asking for the slope of this line. It's asking for the slope of a line perpendicular to it. So what I'm going to write is m with a little perpendicular symbol to represent the slope of the perpendicular line. And again, I know that perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. So what's the negative reciprocal of negative 5/3? Well, first of all, it has to be positive. I flip it. 5/3 becomes 3/5, and 3/5 is my answer. You have to get y by itself to find the slope. And once you have the slope, if it asks for perpendicular, it has a negative reciprocal slope, which means flip it and negate it. If it was the same exact question and it said parallel instead, if this said, whoa, that was weird. If this said parallel lines have the same slope, the answer would have been choice 4. But it doesn't say parallel, it says perpendicular, so the answer is choice 2. Number 3, which equation represents a line perpendicular to the line whose equation is? Well, perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. I don't know what that was. I was not in the right key there. Negative reciprocal slopes. There's 2 big things to know about perpendicular in this course. One we talked about earlier this year. Perpendicular lines form right angles. The other very important concept is you need to know that perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. So to get the slope, I got to get y by itself. Feel free to pause it and get y by itself first, but I'm not going to hesitate. I subtract 2x from both sides. I can't combine unlike terms, and I want to always write the x term first. That's what mx plus b means. The x comes first. Divide away the 3. If they don't divide nicely, leave it as a fraction. And again, this we did in the previous lesson. getting y by itself. So the slope of this line is negative 2/3. So the slope of my perpendicular line is the negative reciprocal of that, the negative reciprocal of negative 2/3, flip it and negate it, positive 3/2. So I need to see which answer has a slope of positive 3/2. So this one's a little annoying because the answers are not in slope-intercept form. Y is not by itself, so you're going to have to kind of do it for each. You could take a little shortcut. Let me just use a different color here. Choice 1, if I divided both sides by 6, would I end up with 3/2? No, I would end up with negative 4/6, which reduces to negative 2/3. In choice 2, if I divided both sides by 2, I would end up with 3/2. That's what I want. That one looks good. Choice 3, if I divided by 2, I would get negative 3/2, which is not what I want. And if I divided by 3 here, I would get negative 2/3. That's not what I want. Choice 2. Again, you don't have to do a shortcut. You can just fully get y by itself for each of them, but you really wouldn't have to do that here. So again, parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. Find the slope, which is what we did yesterday, by getting y by itself. Once you have the slope, if it's asking for perpendicular, you do the negative reciprocal of that, which means you flip it and negate it, and then you match it up from there. What is the equation of a line that is parallel to this line? Well, I know that parallel has the same slope. So the slope of this line is 1, which means the slope of my parallel line, so I'm going to write m with a parallel symbol, since parallel lines have the same slope, is also 1. So you need to now go through each choice and see which one has a slope of 1. You're going to have to get y by itself for each of them. The answer, well, let's do it. Let's not take shortcuts. So choice 1, x plus y equals 5. If I subtract x from both sides, does this have a slope of 1? No. This has a slope of negative 1. Choice 2, 2x plus y equals negative 2. Subtract 2x, subtract 2x, y equals negative 2x minus 2. No, this has a slope of negative 2. Choice 3, y minus x equals negative 1. If I add x to both sides to get y by itself, yes, this has a slope of 1. And I like to always go through all 4 choices. If I get y by itself for this one, no, my slope is 2. Choice 3 is your answer. Parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. To find the slope, you need to get y by itself, which again we did in the last lesson. So I don't think there's anything else I want to go over with you here. Some of them can be a little tricky, but they're pretty straightforward here. Yeah, that's all I'm going to do for you. Again, the big concepts. Parallel has the same slope. Parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular don't. Perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. And to find the negative reciprocal of something, I flip it and negate it. This is a very important lesson. We're going to build off of it in tomorrow's lesson. So make sure this is completed. And again, you have to be able to get y by itself, which we did in the previous lesson. So make sure you're able to do that. Your classwork/homework is to finish parallel and perpendicular lines. Parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. And I hope everyone has a great day.